Arataki Itto, the leader of the Arataki gang, is the first 5-star Geo main DPS unit with a unique charge attack that sets him apart from other Claymore characters. In this video, we'll be covering Itto's strengths and weaknesses to explain whether or not he is worth your Primo Gems. For You Wish is a video series dedicating to noting the good, bad, and ugly of characters in Genshin Impact. Many aspects of a unit are not apparent to the average Genshin player, even after playing them in the trials, due to the inaccurate testing environment that can make characters seem better than they truly are. Explicitly noting the pros and cons of these characters in full details should inform you about how you push them to their highest potential and what it costs to do so. As always, if you enjoy a character for reasons like their voice actor, aesthetic, or personality, these videos are by no means meant to stop you from spending your primos on them. Instead, they should prepare you for the type of problems that you'll need to solve or work around to meet your gameplay expectations. Let's begin by quickly covering Itto's kit. Itto's kit is pretty straightforward. Performing normal attacks will grant him stacks of superlative strength, and he can use those stacks to perform special charge attacks which deal high damage and consume no stamina. Additionally, he always wants to keep his burst up, as it grants him additional stacks of superlative strength, infuses his normal and charge attacks with Geo, and grants him a massive attack boost. Itto is an easy to play, selfish main DPS unit who wants to be the focus of the teams he's in. He can be used with other non-Geo characters, but players may find themselves struggling to maintain his burst uptime with only one other Geo character, because Itto does not generate enough energy to effectively battery himself, meaning that he has to use other Geo units who provide him more energy. Unfortunately, Itto's best support, Goro, does not generate a significant amount of energy either, and players will need a high amount of energy recharge on Itto if he is to play with only Goro. This is an issue which can be solved by adding a third Geo character to Itto's teams. Albedo works quite well in this slot, as he can deal respectable damage to sub DPS due to Goro's buff and can provide Itto with more energy. Other Geo units can work as well, although they might not work as well as Albedo in this slot. The nature of Itto's teams is both a pro and a con. On one hand, he is not reliant on popular supports like Bennett, Kazuha, and Xingqiu, allowing players to easily use them with other units who desire them more. This is very important if players want to challenge the Spiral Abyss, as 2 teams are necessary to clear it. On the other hand, the fact that he wants to run triple Geo teams makes it difficult, though not impossible, to run sub DPS units like Beidou and Shangling, who are reliant on other units to generate energy for them. Additionally, the lack of an element for Anemo units to swirl and shred with the Viridescent Veneer set or absorb means that using units like Venti, Kazuha, and Sucrose is generally a waste in Itto's teams, leaving him without a good source of crowd control. This isn't a huge issue if enemies start out somewhat grouped, since Itto has pretty large AoE on his charge attacks. However, against mobbing floors where enemies may spawn on opposite side of the floor, the lack of grouping can be an issue. It would also be remiss to discuss a DPS unit without discussing their damage output. Itto's Geo teams can deal decent damage, but in single target do not reach the damage levels of teams such as Raiden National or Futao Vape. This is, in large part, because of Itto's previously mentioned issue of not synergizing well with many buffers or sub DPS units like Xingqiu and Shangling. Other DPS units can use units like Bennett, Kazuha, and Xingqiu to buff and enable their damage, while Itto has subpar synergy with these units. The fact that he is still able to reach respectable levels of damage without these powerful supports speaks to his extremely high scalings and his synergy with Goro. However, with little access to other supports, his damage ceiling tends to be lower than the other meta teams. It also needs to be noted that current perceptions of Itto are likely to be skewed because of the current Abyss Blessing and the current enemies in the Abyss. This Abyss Blessing grants a 30% charge attack damage bonus and contains Geo Rift Hounds, who can have their resistance to Geo reduced. Both of these effects can make Itto seem better than he truly is, which makes many current judgments of Itto incorrect. However, Itto's damage being lower than other meta DPS teams does not make him bad in any way. He is a character who can deal damage with few caveats, which cannot be said for many other units like Hu Tao or Ayaka. He possesses a lot of tools in his kit that makes him extremely easy to play, including his resistance interruption, which Goro also provides, his ability to execute combos through dashes and skill casts, his Geo element, which allows him to naturally generate crystallized shields for some additional interruption resist and damage mitigation, and his relatively easy controls. His damage is sustained and unconditional so long as players can maintain burst uptime by running a sufficient amount of energy recharge on Itto. Things like interruption resistance and ease of play may not seem too important for some players. but they are huge factors to consider when evaluating character strength. Interruption is a giant DPS loss, since any time spent being knocked down by enemies is also time spent not dealing damage. Ease of play also matters a lot in high intensity battles in Spiral Abyss, where it may be difficult to remember long combos or perform difficult techniques. Of course, this isn't to say that Itto is completely brain dead. Players can utilize advanced techniques and combos to increase his damage if they wish to do so, but these are by no means necessary to make Itto function as a DPS. So, when should you roll for Itto? You should consider rolling for Itto if you want a DPS character who is very easy to play, which can be an important consideration for mobile players. You should also consider rolling for Itto if you want a unit who can deal good damage without using popular supports, or a unit who has few caveats to their damage, which is important for players who are looking for a comfortable DPS. On the other hand, you shouldn't roll for Itto if you already have two teams who don't demand the same supports, as this takes away from one of Itto's main advantages. You also might want to consider not rolling for him if you want a DPS unit who has teams which deal extremely high DPS, as Itto doesn't reach the tip-top summit of DPS in Genshin Impact. Itto also has the drawback of being locked into a few main teams, which means that you should consider skipping him if you want a flexible DPS unit who can be used in an extremely large variety of teams. Lastly, you shouldn't roll for Itto if you don't want to deal with character energy issues and hate battery. Here's a quick recap of Itto's pros and cons. He is not heavily reliant on supports with the exception of Goro. This means that popular supports like Bennett can be used for the other team. He has high amount of interruption resistance built into his kit, along with shielding from being able to trigger crystallized reactions. He is easy to play, and he also has access to a good battle pass weapon, namely the Serpent Spine. As for his cons, he lacks crowd control in his possible teams. Although this can also be considered a pro, he cannot be used with other popular support units and sub DPS units, which lowers his overall damage ceiling. His AoE potential is subpar, and he needs a sufficient amount of ER and battering to maintain his burst uptime. Thanks for watching this quick overview of the Keqing Main's theory crafting staff's initial thoughts on Itto. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will do our best to answer them.